And welcome back to another Between the Pages book chat. And we are back from our holiday hiatus. And today we have fantasy author C.A. Deegan with us, and he's going to talk about his YA fantasy series, The Cracklock Saga. And it sounds very interesting. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself. Take it away.
Oh, hi guys, and thanks, Anita. Thank you so much for having me on today. Very much appreciated. I'm C.A. Deegan. I'm Craig. I write a series of books called the Cracklock Saga. They are a group of stories about a family who can see fairies. Unfortunately, most of that family want to do away with the fae. They have no interest in them. They view them as all kinds of nastiness. They view them as devils, essentially, due to a warped religion perspective. The main book itself, the first book, Fae or Foe, that starts with our hero, Jack, who is a 15-year-old schoolboy who knows nothing about the Fae, knows nothing about his background and his past, and that is due to the fact that he was glamoured to hide him from the bad part of the family when he was 4 years of age. The story really takes off when the glamour is broken on him and he's thrown into this world that he knows nothing about.
Okay, so what inspired you to write the book?
That's a great question. And what it was reading these awful fairy books to my daughter when she was younger. She's 14 now, so fortunately we don't have to do that anymore. But there's a whole series of them here in the UK. Presumably they're worldwide, but they're all the same story, regardless of the actual book that you pick up. It's always the same story. It's couple of young girls meet some fairy, small fluffy animal, bad guy, end, they win, and it's the same throughout. And my daughter loved these stories, but it got to about the 10th book, and I was really starting to hate them at this point. And every time she got them out, I was like, "Oh, crikey, okay, it's bedtime, fine, it's your choice." But it made me start thinking about if somebody hated fairies, what could they do about it? And that really is what got the ball rolling with the idea for the Cracklocks in all but name. And as I say, it took me a few years really throwing the idea about and thinking about it, thinking how it could work before I finally sat down in 2019 and thought, okay, fine, let's see if we can actually get this down on paper and see if it actually works or not.
Okay, so you amused one of our guests here, our viewers. Uh, he said, gave him a giggle with the awful fairy books.
I'm so pleased. I'm sure that I'm not the only one that's run into these books and thought the same, particularly us dads.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the main character. What's he like?
Okay. Well, as I say, he's a 15-year-old a schoolboy, single parent. Both he and his mother, without trying to give too much of the story away, were both glamoured by his father when he was 4 years of age to hide him from the darker side of the family because they needed him for a particular thing that they were trying to enact. They've always been trying to destroy the Fae, and they found a way to try and destroy the whole of fairy itself, the realm of fairy, and they needed Jack for that. He's a hard worker. As I say, he's from a single parent family because his dad went off to try and stop the dark side of the family and he disappeared. He never came back. But because his mum and himself had this glamour on them, which basically made them stop seeing fairies and everything else, they knew no different. They assumed he died. So he grew up, and it's almost it's a UK kind of deprived background, really, that he grows up in. He's a good soul. He's a good character overall. But he works hard. He's got a couple of jobs that he works on to try and support his mum. His mum works 2 jobs. They live in a small house and so on. And it's really because they are hidden, as I say, from the other side of the family. So that really is a character. And the series is really how he comes into his own, because when the glamour is removed from him, I won't tell you how, he can all of a sudden see this world that he has no concept of, no understanding of. You know, at the end of the day, how many 15-year-old lads believe in fairies? They don't. Okay. So he's thrust into this world. Fortunately, he has a few people who are there to explain and help him get to grips with this. And it's really his development, particularly when the bad side of the family come into it and it's left to to him and a couple of the other ones to try and stop them from doing what they want to do, where he really starts to shine. He's yeah.
Okay, so when you wrote the fairy world, did you base it on traditional folklore, or did you play with it a little bit in your own way?
It's completely my interpretation of it. I did when I first started doing this. I mean, my knowledge of fairies was really from the fantasy films that we all know and love. It was from some of the fantasy books, the more well-known ones, and it was from the Brothers Grimm, that sort of thing. What I did was I took quite a lot of more in-depth looks at fairy lore. My bookshelves are absolutely crammed with fairy lore books now, and they're holding back Teen and Nog and the whole kit and caboodle there. So I knew what I thought it looked like, so I tried to use some of the fairy lore books to fit it, so it made sense to people who knew a little bit more about it than I did. As I say, the actual fairy side and the fairies themselves. I selected a few who are more less well-known fairies. For example, one of the ones who helps Jack is a Fiorin, which is an Irish fairy. That's for Marillion. So it was really a question of trying to fit what I thought against what more generalised knowledge is of the fairy kingdom, of people who are a little bit more in the know about it than those mere mortals who just watch Disney films and so on.
Yeah.
I did take some research.
Yeah, the Fiore you said?
Fiorin.
Yeah, that's one I haven't heard of either. So excellent research there. Because I mean, I do know a lot about Irish mythology and fairies and such, but I don't think I've heard of that one. So
yeah, they red hats, green suits. They can have green skin or not. They're small. They tend to help people. In this particular book, he works for the Seelie courts, the Seelie and the Unseelie, the bad and the good courts in fairy. He's almost like a fairy not a fairy James Bond. That's the wrong way of describing him. He's a operative, or he was before he retired. But he's always been with the Cracklock family. He's been with them for generations as a friend to them.
So Barrett likes your glamour idea that you use. So.
Oh, thank you, Barrett.
Anyway, so what was the most difficult scene you had to write in the book, or type of scene?
The first scene of book one, because I had no idea what I was doing. My background when I come to that, I've got a scientific background. I write reports and things, and I do beta reading and have done for a number of years, but mainly more in the horror genre, particularly the zombie apocalypse, places like that. That's the sort of books that I read for pleasure, as well as the fantasy ones. And it was really sort of doing those that made me think, well, can I not write my own book? Because I've got this idea, I can do it. And when I sat down to write the first book, I had no idea how to start it. I had a vague idea. So I wrote the first chapter, and then I ripped it out and I did something completely different, a completely different first chapter. And it's only when I first started to look at getting the book edited, when it was finished, I let my wife read it first of all, and she said, "Yes, this is pretty good. You need to get this out there, really." So when I sent it off to the editors, I sent both chapters and said, "Which one do you think fits? Can you please tell me, because I have no idea." They came back, and the one that isn't actually in book one now was the one which was kind of my favourite, but that was certainly the most difficult one to write. Everything else, once I got the ball rolling, I always say, it's like the little engine who could. I think I can, I know I can, sure I can, blah, 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 blah. It's like pushing a rock uphill. Once you get going, you can do it. So yeah, it was the most difficult part was doing that chapter one, because chapter one of your first book as the first author has to be the one that grabs people. Otherwise, there's no point. They won't read the rest of it.
Yeah, I think all authors can relate to that, because you pretty much always have to go back to chapter one when you finish a book and rewrite it and make it better.
Yeah, I did it the other way around. I wrote two. As I say, I wrote two before. I pulled. My father said to me, he said, "Well, you don't want to put that one in. That's rubbish. Take it out." So I did, and then he then told me the other one wasn't very good either, so I had to do some tweaks. He's one of my best critics, actually. He does come up with some very good advice, really.
Okay, so what was the favorite scene you wrote in the book, in the series?
Okay, there are a number of them. I think my all-time favourite scenes, as I say, I mean, I've just finished book 4 now. Book 3 is due to be published in start of February. But in book 2, there is a scene where Dorcas, who's the brownie who looks after the family, and Fermarilli and Fermi are trapped by the Cracklocks in the catacombs of the Cracklock Manor, and they have to escape from the jailer, who is a nasty piece of work. The Cracklocks have been capturing Fae and using them for all kind of nefarious means for hundreds of years, and they have to escape from the jailer, the jail that he's in. And writing that, I absolutely loved writing that scene. It was it took me a little while. It took me about 3 days to get it and tweak it just how I wanted it, but it had everything in it I wanted. My brownie is a bit of a scrapper. She likes she's not afraid of a dust up, a bit of a punch up, particularly when it comes to defending the children of the family or anybody else. And yeah, that's my favourite scene. But there are plenty of others that I really enjoyed as well. Dorcas seeing off the bullies when they're trying to beat Jimmy up was another one. Again, they tend to all mainly revolve around Dorcas, actually, thinking about it. But yeah.
Okay, well, you've mentioned Dorcas as one of the secondary characters. So tell us a little bit about some of the characters. Any of them steal scenes, or are they just sort of there?
Oh no, there's a couple. There's Great Aunt Elsie, who is Jack's. So she's Great Aunt. She comes to help him after the accident he's had, that sort of starts to remove the glamour from him. But she has always been part of the Cracklock world. She can see the Fae and everything else. So it's really her that introduces to him. She's a game old bird, as we say in the UK. She's a bit of a dry wit, not really afraid of anything, a bit of a tough nut. Thinking about the bad guys themselves, the main ones in books 1 and 2 are Anastasia and her son Benedict. Benedict is a complete, well, we would describe him probably as a psychopath, as a sociopath. He doesn't come over as being like that in the books, but he just lives for killing and torturing the Fae. I'm not overly graphic with it, but it's insinuated there. His mother is a nasty piece of work, Anastasia. And their great uncle their uncle Malchiah, who is one of the main protagonists in books 1 and 2, he's responsible for a destruction of one of the things that will bring down the fairy realm. So they are all pretty nasty, I think. I've certainly tried to make them as evil as I can without making them totally evil. On the good guy side, I've already mentioned Dorcas the Brownie. I've mentioned the Fiorin. There's Mr. Binks as well, who appears in books 1 and 2. He's the one really that triggers all this with Jack. He's the old fella, the old man who lives up at the house when Jack's paper around, and he's the one that really initiates everything that happens to Jack. Again, he has ulterior motives that don't become clear until book 2. So there's quite a cast. If you look on the website, there's a whole thing called the Cracklock World on there that shows you some of them and gives a bit more of a background. Certainly for books 1 and 2, I'll be updating it with the characters from book 3 in the next few weeks when it releases.
Oh, that sounds cool. So which character would you like to hang out with in real life?
Oh, right. Okay. I like my dinners, so I would have to say Dorcas. I mean, she's the one who looks after the family. She cooks for them all the time, and there's a scene in book 1 where she serves this huge breakfast for Jack. It's served on a bin lid essentially, and it has absolutely everything on it. You're familiar with the full English breakfast. We like a whole load of fried things and everything else, and but it's got all sorts on there, porridge and everything all mixed in together. So I'd hang out with her. I'd probably hang out with Elsie as well, because she's never short of having a bit of a dry quip, and a bit of a comeback for you. She's sarcastic, it's fair to say. So yeah, probably those two. But any of them, I would want to hang out with the other guys, the darker side of the family, particularly nasty. But certainly the good guys I'd hang out with. Thank you.
Yeah, it might be dangerous to hang out with the villains. So, you mentioned that you also have written horror. Tell us a little bit about what else you've written.
They were mainly shorts, if I'm honest with you. I wrote one that was basically that's where Mr. Binks. That was the first story I ever wrote. Mr. Binks is in that one. He's one of the bad guys in the first one. A completely different concept. That was a short horror for a writing competition that was published. Where it's at the same house. It's at Twillington House where this takes place. But he is essentially it's a boarding house basically. It's a house with a large converted into apartments, and he has these people in there. Most of them are dead and mummified, but he's still claiming their pensions. It's completely alien from how he becomes in the Cracklock Saga, but that's that one that I did there. One of the other ones I wrote was a one for I'm in a group of some great people. It's an online pub, and they were doing a short horror story book last Halloween. I wrote a story in that called Bluebells, which is where one of the characters that appears in book 4, Tobias, first raised his ugly head. That one is the story of a lady who is abused by her husband, and she runs off. She's saved from him by a fae in the woods, but the fae wants payment, and that, as it transpires, the payment is her baby. It takes her baby, but then Tobias comes in at the end, and he knows how to get it back. But that's where it finishes. I'm kind of thinking about expanding on that a little. So, yeah, that's the two main shorts that I've got published. I've written a few others. I've been submitting them. I've submitted one last week, one that's been hanging around, which is about a wood fae that chases two boys through a forest. Again, that's a horror one. But I think I probably will write some more horror style thing, but I'm focused on this world I've created at the moment.
So, are there any other genres you want to try in future, or are you going to stick with fantasy and horror?
No, I'd probably stick with fantasy and horror. I mean, they always kind of say to you, don't they, write what you know. They're the things that I've grown up with. Well, look at me. I don't think I'm probably the best romance writer in the world, to be honest. I don't know. I kind of read some detective novels and things as well, so I may look at perhaps a detective parody or something later on. That's much further down the line. I mean, realistically, what I want to do with this, once this series is finished, I think it could be 6 books, maybe 7. It depends if we get the story arc finished. I then have Tobias's story, which will form a whole different raft to do. And I also want to write the backstories. I want to write the histories of Marillion and Dorcas and Elsie. Elsie has a bit of a love interest with the bad guy in book 1. It's very subtle because I'm intending it to be a full-blown story. I don't know how romantic it will be. I'm not really a romance guy, but I'll see what I can do about that. So yeah, in answer to your question, I think I'll stick with fantasy and horror for now. Thanks.
Okay, well, it sounds like we've got a lot coming up from you, even in just fantasy and horror. So I think we'll wrap it up here, and I'll let you tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
Okay, great. Well, again, thank you very much, Enid, for taking the time. It's much appreciated. Okay, I am on Amazon, as I say, the Cracklock Saga. That's book 1, Fate or Foe. That's on there. Or there's book 2, which is The Lost and the Departed. I have got the banners up behind me, but my study isn't big enough for them, unfortunately, to get them on the camera. So that's that. They're on Amazon. We're on Facebook, the Cracklock Saga. We're on Instagram, the Cracklock Saga. And the website is thecracklocksaga.com. You can get to the books from that website. There's quite a lot of interesting bits and pieces on there. I already mentioned about this, the Cracklock world, which tells you about some of the characters. There's some reviews and things on there as well. So hopefully you guys, if you're interested in people who like killing fairies, you might want to check it out. So thanks very much.
And the link to the series on Amazon is in the description if you do want to check it out. And it sounds interesting, so please go. And I'd like to thank you for being a guest today. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. And it was lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for, as I say, for taking the time today. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, and that's it for today's show. And Between the Pages, we'll be back next week with another guest. So join us then. And bye for now.